So this is the Friends of the Library Meet the Candidates night once again, and I'm so glad that all of you are here. It's our chance in the community to meet the candidates that are going to be running for election on April 8th. So I'd like to listen, and I'm sure you're here to hear what they have to say. So anyway, I'm going to start with reading the official ballot. As you can see, we don't have a good turnout of candidates tonight. We have 3 people, but I'm going to start at the bottom of the ballot anyway, so you know who's running. For Planning Board, for a 5-year term, is Robert Woods. Housing Authority, for a 5-year term, is Adele Collard. Sewer Commission is Robert Woods. Public Library Trustee for 3 years, Ron O'Connor and Andrew Horton. For Parks and Rec, Lindsay Marie Waller. Board of Assessors is Eric Easterday. Dighton Rehoboth Regional School District, and this is for 3 years, we have Eliza Kucha, Donna Marie Burdos, and Timothy John Tulin. For Dighton Rehoboth Regional School District for 1 year, Christopher Andre. Town Moderator for 1 year is William Moore. And for Selectman for 3 years is Nicole Mello. So that's going to be the ballot that you'll see on April 8th. Now we've gone over the ground rules with the candidates tonight. And this is the opportunity to meet our candidates through their opening statements and questions from you. The candidates will have 3 minutes for an opening statement, and then when we get to the questions, they will have 2 minutes to answer. Questions from the audience will be taken after being acknowledged by me, the moderator, Pat Gales. And we're having trouble with the microphone. This is the only microphone tonight. So if you raise your hand, I'll recognize you, state your question, and Zach is going to be the relay person to get it up here. He's going to speak loudly so that we can hear it, and the candidates can hear it too. Word your questions so that they can't be answered by just yes or no, and try not to repeat questions. The questions should reflect the issues of the greatest interest to the entire community and cover a broad range of topics. Candidates and audience members are strongly encouraged to focus on the issues, not on personalities, and no personal attacks will be allowed. Candidates will be timed and will be given a 30-second warning with the sign before the time is up to be able to complete their thoughts, and our timekeeper is sitting right in the front row. Karen has agreed to do that. And if time permits at the end, the candidates will have 1 minute for a closing statement, and we expect to conclude by around 8:30. The Meet the Candidates night is being taped and will be shown on Channel 9 at a later date and possibly by Wednesday. So I thank you for coming tonight, and we're going to get started. And actually, we're going to start with the Public Library Trustee, Ron O'Connor, is here to give his opening statements. Ron?
Good evening. Thank you to the Friends of the Dighton Public Library for hosting this candidates night. I bring integrity, experience, and commitment to my candidacy for library trustee. I've been a Dighton resident since 1994. I provided countless hours of service to the community to make Dighton a better place to live, learn, and play. I am proud of my volunteer service to the community in public education, arts and culture, and town government because it models good citizenship and values civic engagement. At Dighton Elementary School, I served as secretary of the parent-teacher organization, a parent volunteer for the student newspaper and science club, a parent representative on the hiring committee for a school principal, and member of the playground committee, which established the current playground over a decade ago. I've supported arts and culture as president of the Dighton Art Association, a member of the board of directors of the Dighton Historical Society and a member of the planning committee for a music festival that benefited the Dighton Elementary School playground. I am most proud of my participation on the Dighton Lions Club Arts Festival Planning Committee since its inception in 2005. I've designed posters or postcards every year, served on the music committee in the early years of the festival, built and maintained its website, and provided other support to make the event successful. The Lions have a great team. I consider it a privilege to support the festival that not only benefits their charitable causes, but also brings the community together. In addition to my role as a library trustee since 2008, I've had other roles in town government. When the town needed someone to revive the Dighton Cultural Council so that its annual allocation from the state would not be lost in 2007, I stepped up to chair the council, organize membership, and approve thousands of dollars in funding. When the Board of Selectmen decided to separate the Board of Health from its responsibilities, they appointed me to a committee to explore the structure and functions of the board in 2015, and then a committee to make recommendations to organize the separate board in 2016. I've chaired both committees. The Dighton Tricentennial in 2012 was an amazing celebration of the town's history. I supported the Tricentennial Committee as the official photographer for the Tricentennial booklet and designer of the postcard for the Tricentennial Parade. I supported the Tricentennial Ball Committee by taking portrait photographs of attendees and donating all proceeds to the Dighton Food Bank. I hold a Bachelor of Science degree with distinction from Worcester Polytechnic Institute and a Master's in Public Health degree from the University of Michigan School of Public Health. 30 years of my professional career have been in public health management positions in state government. My contributions to public health in Massachusetts have been recognized by the Massachusetts Health Officers Association, Boston University School of Public Health, and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. I'm entrusted and respected by my colleagues in public health. It is an honor and privilege to serve the residents of Dighton. I look forward to your questions to talk about my vision for the Dighton Public Library. Thank you all very much.
All right, so next we have for the Dighton Rehoboth School Committee, and we'll start with Tim Toolin.
Good evening. My name is Timothy Toole, and I'm running for the Dighton Rehoboth School Committee. First, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library for sponsoring this event, and for you, the citizens and taxpayers, for coming out to hear what all of us have to say. Tonight, I hope to give you all an idea of who I am and what I believe about public education. I promise to answer your questions truthfully and honestly. If at the end of this evening you feel that I would be a good representative for you and your concerns as a member of the DR School Committee, I hope you will honor me with your vote. If not, I hope you will vote for another candidate. The only way that citizens have any control over their elected officials in a free society is with their vote. I've lived in Dighton since 2005. After working 4 years in a parochial school, I am completing my 25th year as a public school teacher. I earned a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Bridgewater State College in 1991 and a master's degree in curriculum, instruction, and assessment from Lesley University in 2001. I also hold a license as an elementary principal. I have experience teaching at the elementary and middle school levels, having taught grades 3, 4, and 5 for 19 years, and I'm currently in my 10th year as a grade 7 social studies teacher. I am a conservative, but because I am a conservative does not mean that I am closed-minded to other points of view that might diverge from my own. In fact, I abhor the current two-party system in our nation today. Neither side seems willing to listen to the other, much less compromise. I can't promise I will always agree with another's opinion on important issues in education, but I can promise that I will always listen and treat every stakeholder with the respect that I would want to be treated with. Over the past 5 years, I have watched wokeness creep into our public schools, both across the Commonwealth and the nation. The role of public schools is not to turn our students into social justice warriors. Our mission as educators is to keep students safe, provide a quality academic education in the core subject areas, exposure to and experience with the arts, and to create lifelong learners who will leave our schools to be productive and valued members of American society. I believe it is the role of parents to instill the values that they cherish into their children. I strongly disagree with the current trend in public education of keeping certain information from parents regarding sexuality and gender. I believe the teaching of gender identity and sexuality in the younger grades is extremely inappropriate. As students begin to move into adolescence, certain areas of sexual development should be addressed by trained health educators. But all such instruction must be age appropriate, and all such curriculum must be readily available to parents, giving them the option to opt their child out of any such instruction that they object to. And I see I'm just about out of time, so thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for being mindful of our timekeeper. Next, we have Eliza Kucha for school committee.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you for being here. Good evening. I'm Eliza Kucher, and I've been representing you on the school committee for nearly 13 years. This is the first time I've been involved in a contested race in quite some time. While I'm happy to see people taking an interest in town elections, and more specifically in what is happening in our schools, my hope is that this race is not contested for political reasons that distract from the real challenges facing our schools today. The serious issues we face require a thoughtful and at times experienced hand. It's been a difficult budget season, and the school committee voted 8-2 Tuesday evening to cut 6 positions, including a business teacher at the high school, foreign language teachers at each middle school, and a music teacher at the middle school level. While I support Superintendent Rooney and our administrative team, at a time when we are trying to increase enrollment and provide a well-rounded education for our students, cutting programs was not a decision that I could support. Some have suggested we should increase class sizes. I recently toured our elementary and middle schools with our administrators. We continue to deal with spacing constraints and safety issues in our buildings. Increased class sizes would only exacerbate these problems. I have worked closely with our central office administration as a member of the Facilities Advisory Committee to apply for an MSBA feasibility study. This would allow us to explore solutions to these real concerns that might include much needed state funding. I was a classroom teacher for over 30 years. I've been the chair of the school committee, and I serve on countless subcommittees, from setting policy to working with our high school students directly on the student advisory committee, as well as serving as the district liaison on the town capital outlay committee. My son attended our elementary, middle, and high school, which set the foundation for his present success in his chosen field. The town of Dighton has always valued education and generously supported our schools. We need to ensure that our schools remain competitive and that we continue the culture of excellence that our students and families expect and deserve. If re-elected, I look forward to working with this administration to continue to move our district forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, now it's time for questions. Yes.
Ron, there's been some folks that have been saying...
Is this for the school committee or for?
Ron, sorry.
Ron, okay. Why don't we have questions for the library trustee first, and then we'll do questions for the school committee, and then if we have time, we'll go back to the library trustee if anyone has more questions. So, okay, go ahead, John.
There's been some folks that have been saying they want to get certain books removed from the library, and there seems to be some discrepancy amongst those people as to what the policies are for inclusion into the collection. I was hoping you could talk about what the policies, procedures are for that, so everyone knows that it's not
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Did everyone hear the question?
No.
So, exactly.
Can you repeat it one more time for me?
Some folks have been asking for some books to be removed from the school, the library. Not a very good public speaker, excuse me. And they're saying, hey, we want to remove these books. And the library is saying, there's a procedure to do that. You can't just go in and take books out. So then it turned into this, well, you're trying to ban books and we're not banning books and all that. So it needs to be cleared up. There's a procedure for these things, and I would like the procedure to be described.
Are you all set, Ron? You got
Up there or?
Thank you very much for your question. I do, for the record, want to clarify that the request that the library has received has not been to remove books per se from the library. There hasn't been a request to ban any books. The request has been to, essentially, as we see it, to restrict access to books. And nevertheless, we do have a policy. The libraries, under Massachusetts general laws, libraries are required to have a collection development policy, and they're also libraries also have a reconsideration policy. So there's a means by which people may request that the library staff review books that are in the collection. So we have two things here. We have the library collection development policy, which guides our decisions on books that come into the library. And those are decisions made by the library staff. We empower the staff to do that. And they have criteria by which they do that. The collection development policy is there's a form that people submit. And then the process involves receiving the form and having a conversation with the library staff. A dialogue about what the concerns are, the nature of the concerns, and working towards a solution. That's the typical process for doing that.
Thank you. Another question for the library trustee position?
My question is, Mr. O'Connor must be familiar with some of the titles of these books that people wish to be locked up. And I'd like to know what some of those titles are, because I've heard them referred to by one of the candidates who I think is running against Mr. O'Connor, who's not here tonight. That I don't know why they're not here, but they refer to the books as pornography. And so I'd like to ask Mr. O'Connor if he knows any of these titles, and if indeed they are technically pornography.
Thank you. The only book that I'm aware of that's been called to our attention is a book called Seeing Queer. And Seeing Gender, sorry. There's another book with a similar title that I often confuse, so thank you for that correction. Seeing Gender. And I think pornography, the definition, there's no legal definition of pornography. There's a legal definition of obscenity. No, that's the only book that I'm aware of, is Seeing Gender, is the book that's being challenged.
To follow up, what is that book about? What exactly, what would be the objection to that book?
The book is the audience for the book is for young people who are questioning or exploring gender-related issues, and so it's a self-help book for people who are doing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ron as library trustee candidate?
Hi, Ron, could you tell me what your vision is as a library trustee if you would be reelected?
Thank you. I spent so much time talking about myself and my background because I think it's important for people to know who I am and how committed I am to this town, my adopted town. I grew up in Atlantic City. So my vision for the Dighton Public Library is to continue to advance the library as a community asset that represents the diverse viewpoints, and interests of the community. One of the things I'm very much committed to, and it's part of the recent experience, is that we want to make sure that people have an appreciation for, and a respect for, and a trust for the library itself, and for librarians. Librarians and libraries are under attack, and so that's one of my priorities, is to see that. And last but not least is to provide a space where the library staff can meet the needs of the patrons. We need a space that the library patrons deserve, and a space that the library staff can operate and provide services in. So, as you may know, there's a proposal and a plan for the Smith Memorial Hall on Main Street to move the library to there. That's an important step, and that's something that's also part of my vision. Has been my vision since the beginning. Before I became a library trustee, in 2005, I joined the library building committee that was looking at other options for a new library building. So that's been part of my passion here. The library that we have is needs to be improved. Town voted on that in 1970, that the library was inadequate. The Carnegie building on Main Street is inadequate. So that's my vision, again, to ensure that we have a diverse collection that meets the needs and interests and viewpoints of the entire community, to support the staff and the library, to ensure that people understand it is a valuable community asset, and then to get the Dighton Public Library in a space that's appropriate and adequate for its needs. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Throughout your time spent as a library trustee, so you've seen the development of different plans for the building itself. Have you seen a plan that is more affordable and more feasible than what we have before us right now? And then also, if you could talk about if this project for some reason doesn't happen, how that affects our access to other towns' libraries through the sales network.
I'm trying to think back to the number of proposals that we've had over the years. There was a couple that involved building a new building at substantial expense. There was a proposal to expand and renovate the Carnegie building. So in terms of, I haven't seen one that's more affordable and feasible than the current project that the town is looking at on Main Street. In total dollars, in real dollars, past projects were in multi-million-dollar range. So to your second question about the implications of if the library doesn't move, I think that's a question for the library director and the Mass Board of Library Commissioners so I sort of encourage you to talk with the library director about that. She's better informed and she's more in touch with them. I know there are concerns. There are requirements that libraries need to meet in order to be certified. That has to do with hours of operation, the qualifications of the staff, the investment of dollars in the library. The budget can't change from year to year. There's a minimum requirement for funding. And then there's a percentage of the funding of the total budget, which for Dighton is 19%, that needs to go into books. And the question is our current configuration one that would threaten our certification as a library? If we're not certified as a library, I can answer that question if that were to happen. I don't want to speak to whether or not that will happen, but if that were to happen, public libraries through the trustees have the option of refusing library cards of towns that don't have a certified public library. I'm a trustee, but we've made that difficult decision for residents of towns that have a decertified library, that we're not going to allow those library cards to be honored at our library. And the reason for that is to make the statement that libraries are valuable, towns need to invest in their libraries. Did I run out of time? Thank you.
I gotta keep my eye on you, Karen, sorry. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes.
If the library gets decertified, it's my understanding, can you validate this? That, by the way, this is my husband. Can you validate that there's a possibility that not only would since I use the library, not able to use the Dighton Public Library and the Library of Sales, but I can't use any other library. I might not be able to use any other library in the state. That's correct. Any other town or city library.
That's indeed, that's my wife, who's a bigger library lover than I am. If you can believe that. And I'll answer this question. Thank you. That's a challenging question. You're right. That's the whole thing about certification outside the sales network. There are challenges to being a resident of a town that doesn't have a certified library. And so your access to library resources, you can go into any library in the state. You can do that today. You can go into any library and get a library card. I have library cards for a number of towns in the Commonwealth because it gives us access to those resources in those libraries, including museum passes. So you're not banned from going into the library, but in terms of circulating materials and taking books out of the library and other materials out of the library, there would be restrictions on that at the discretion of that library. So individual libraries would have to make that decision.
Can I ask one more?
Is there anyone else that has a question before I allow that gentleman his second question? Okay, go.
My question is, what are the prospects of securing more grant money to complete the library project? To help complete the library project?
Well, we're Library Director Jocelyn Tavares is amazing. She's constantly looking for funding. We have a grant application now to the cultural funding that would enable particular funding related to the HVAC system and other improvements. And that one's substantial. That's $200,000. Where she's always on the lookout for funding, grant funding to support the library project. So the prospects are, we've got some things in the works. We've got some that we've received, sort of smaller scale, but this larger one we're very hopeful about, and we are looking for other funding sources. I should point out, just as the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, the building fund that we've accessed and been on the waiting list in the past for either renovation or renovation of existing space or building a new library building is not accessible to us at this point, but could be in the future.
Any other questions for our candidate for library trustee? Yes, in the back.
I don't know too much about how that funded grants work, but does sometimes it work like if you spend a certain amount of money on a specific thing, like if you spend $1 million on HVAC, we'll give you 200,000 towards it? Like, is it kind of it's money towards something if you're spending money on a specific thing? Is that kind of how a lot of grants work?
I'm not sure about that specific grant that I mentioned. I think what you're speculating on, what you're asking, which is, if you're a homeowner and you make a purchase of that type, you get a certain amount back. But I don't know if that's the case with public buildings or commercial buildings. I think those opportunities may be there, but that's not specifically what we're looking at this point.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to the school committee. Jonathan?
So I'm assuming everybody can hear me, but I'll speak up anyway. I'm going to actually ask 3 questions of both candidates, if I could.
Can you ask one at a time?
Sure. I'll go one first. The first one is, and this is not a political question, but it's a question of curiosity for me. Whether or not either of you think that anything should change with regard to what's taught in our schools for gender identification, whether or not you think there should be an age limit on those conversations, or whether or not you think there should be open conversations to be had between the kids and the teachers regardless of age. That's my first question.
That sounded like 3 to me.
I was trying to be precise and decisive.
Okay, you all set?
I'm going to ask for clarification and
Okay.
what the issue was. And then
Okay, so we'll have Eliza go first, then Tim.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat if what is taught in our schools?
If there's conversation and discussion and in teaching questions that affect gender identification, how that should be discussed, how it should be taught, and if they believe there should be any age limitations.
Okay, thank you. As with anything that is being taught in our classrooms, I think we have to consider age appropriateness, consider our audience, consider that we have a professional in that classroom that also knows that age group. I think that we have to use some common sense that sometimes we don't turn to in these situations. And I certainly believe that age appropriateness, I keep coming back to that, is important when you're considering the types of conversations you might have and how those conversations may go. I also would say that in our schools, we have our classrooms, we have our guidance suites, we have different departments also where these conversations might take place as opposed to a general classroom conversation. But I do think that we always have to come back to what age group are we dealing with, what's the topic, is it appropriate at that level?
I agree with Mrs. Kuchar about there's a place for it, possibly. I don't think the regular classroom is the place for it. I think if the students are confused or questioning who they are, the appropriate place would be in a private setting with a guidance counselor, not in the classroom. What I see, I teach 7th grade, and I see kids that are confused about who they are, and that is no different than it was 20 years ago. But what I'm seeing happening in public schools across the country is that there are certain individuals in schools that are pushing children in a certain direction. For example, you know, a girl might be a tomboy. Well, you know, maybe you're a boy and you were born into a girl's body, or, you know, a boy is a little bit effeminate, and that, oh, well, maybe you're really a girl in a boy's body or something like that. I think it's completely normal for children to be confused and to ask questions, but I disagree with, in recently what I've seen across the country is this pushing it on the children. And I have girls that I have in my classroom now that want to be referred to as boy names and vice versa. And I just don't think that children at that age have developed enough to make those kind of decisions yet. Let's, you know, let them get through adolescence, and then, you know, if they get to the high school level, it might be a little more appropriate, but I am very opposed to it at the elementary and also at the middle school level.
Yes.
Yes, hi. I'd like to address the issue of wokeness you brought up in the beginning. What would you say constitutes wokeness, and can you give me an example of where you may have seen that in our schools here in Dighton, and what that looks like in terms of what you're looking to get rid of?
Okay, Tim first, then Eliza.
I haven't seen any wokeness in the Dighton schools. As I said, I work in the Taunton schools, but I do follow national news and I do follow statewide news, and it just seems to me that there's less of a focus on academics and more on trying to turn students into anti-racists, and I'm seeing a lot of talk about white privilege and things like that, and I don't think it's got a place in our schools. It's not the job of our schools to turn our kids into social justice warriors. So I guess my definition of that, of wokeness, is we're trying to do that with kids. We're trying to get kids to say, look at all the inequities in our society, and it's your duty, you know, to do something about it. I disagree with that. I think that's the duty of an adult to make those decisions for themselves. I don't think schools should be pushing that agenda on children.
Merriam-Webster describes woke as being alert to injustice and discrimination in society, most especially racism. And I do not see what is being described as woke in our schools, but if woke means being inclusive and welcoming all students, if it means creating critical thinkers who respect diverse opinions and are willing to work together to compromise and create solutions to difficult problems, then I accept that label.
Thank you. It's not a debate.
I was going to agree with what she said.
Oh, okay.
So that's all.
No. Anyway, next question. Dan?
If there was just one particular issue that you wanted to focus on that motivates you to run for the school committee, what is that one issue that you feel is most paramount in your decision to become a member of the committee?
Thank you for the question. I don't believe there's one issue in particular that's driving me to want to remain or be reelected to the school committee. I enjoy the work I do. As I stated, I was an educator for over 30 years. I miss being in the schools. This gives me the opportunity to stay connected to the field. I would also like to be able to continue with some of the projects that we've worked on and see with this new administration to continue to move our district forward. I think it's a very difficult time for schools, for public schools in general. My hope, as I stated earlier in my introductory statement, is that we are not so focused on the national political issues, so to speak, but I appreciate the questions that ask more specifically, what is the evidence, or what do you see, or how do you see that happening in our schools here locally in Dighton? We have budget issues, just as any public school does in the Commonwealth and across the country right now. A limited number of tax dollars, and that bucket needs to fill everyone's needs. When I earlier described that we are cutting, we're in the position to cut teachers, to cut staff, to cut programs, that's something that is urgent, in my opinion. Those programs, oftentimes in education, historically, do not come back. We have issues, as I stated, in our town, locally, of our elementary and middle schools being quickly becoming overcrowded. We need to deal with that issue. And how are we going to provide safety for our students and allow them to have the education they deserve in our town? So I'm more concerned with the issues that we face here locally each day and the challenges that our students and teachers are facing. And if I can in any way be part of the solution to some of these problems, that's why I'd like your vote, and I'd like to be able to continue the work that we've started.
A trend that I've seen where I work in Taunton, is that schools seem reluctant to let children experience failure. I've seen that, the students are less accountable for attendance, they're less accountable for their behavior, they're less accountable for their grades. And in my opinion, this is a terrible disservice to students, because as we push these students through school without any consequences for their actions or anything like that, they grow up to become adults that are not used to consequences for their actions. And I think that it's okay to let kids fail. I think it's okay to let kids fail as long as professionals are there to explain why they failed and to help them understand so that they don't fail in the same way the second time. I think that character is built by going through adversity. And what I've seen in my experience in the Taunton Public Schools, and I can't speak to whether this is or is not happening in Dighton, I think it's just almost like a nationwide thing where, we just don't want the kids, we don't want them to be sad, we don't want them to go through any struggle, and that's how people grow. And I think that we need to get back to that, and it's okay if kids fail, because you learn from your mistakes and you grow.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Gary?
So Eliza had touched on it briefly, and it's a major concern of mine, is just the improvement to the physical buildings. So my daughter, who's in 6th grade right now, here at the school, is a full-time wheelchair user, and we have, so we're getting close to the high school years, and we have 2 beautiful, very accessible new high schools, which are options for her. So what are you gonna do to keep students specifically with disabilities in district just on an accessibility level? Like, how will you fight to improve the buildings and make them accessible for everyone?
Okay, but Tim goes first.
Thank you for the question. I'm not aware of any restrictions on students with disabilities in Dighton or at the high school or at any of the schools. I assume all the buildings are accessible. I guess I assume incorrectly. Like I said, I don't know. So I would certainly expect that they would be, and I kind of have a hard time understanding how they aren't. Are you talking about wheelchair accessibility? Are you saying there?
Well, just to kind of clarify the question, there is a massive deficit as far as ADA accessibility throughout all the schools. I think the minimum requirements, can you get in the school, can you get to most of the classrooms? Yes, but you can't fully access everything that that school has to offer.
Well, that's surprising to me that that's already not in place. I was not aware of that, and I would certainly do what was ever in my power to make sure that that happened. I would assume there might be some federal or state money that would deal with that.
I too will echo these comments. I can't speak specifically for the high school. I wish I could. But it's unacceptable if the case is that there is any kind of lack of accessibility for any of our students in any of our buildings. And if that's the case, then that should be rectified. Another question.
Okay, seeing none. Oh, Jonathan does. I'm sorry, you did have 3 questions, didn't you?
I still have my other 2 questions.
Okay, I'll give them to you.
FYI, regarding the question for Mr. Smith for both of the candidates, I'm just going to give you the simple responses. I'm the ADA coordinator for the town of Dighton, and I can tell you that all 3 of the schools under the purview of the school department for this town are far below the basic required ADA standards that the Commonwealth expects from schools. This has been a long time issue. It's going to take a long time to resolve, but to answer the question, there is an enormous amount of work that has to be done. And as my granddaughter just said, there are even kids at the high school with wheelchairs who can't get around the whole school. So that's the answer to the question that you really should be able to have. My second question though is going to go a little bit deeper with regard to an educational component specifically. And I guarantee you these kids are going to leave me here and not let me go home with them after I ask it. The question evolves around the use of Chromebooks in schools and at home and cell phones in school and at home. So this is why they're not going to let me go home. I can tell you, although they will disagree with me, they are like any other teenagers at the high school. They use their phones not only to do homework with other kids, but share the answers with other kids. They use their Chromebooks in schools. They're going to shake their head no so they don't get in trouble, I'm sure. They also use their Chromebooks when they're taking tests and their phones when they're taking tests to share information with each other, take screenshots and share it with other kids. They will check with other kids who have classes in other periods. What did you get for an answer? What were the questions, et cetera, et cetera. My question is, what are either of you going to do about this type of policy in the school? Because honestly, and I'm not referring to these 2 kids specifically, I don't see a lot of the kids in school learning because they're getting all the information from other kids. Why do they have to bother? The teachers know they're doing it. When the teachers go out of the classroom and turn their heads, the kids are doing it. In many classes, the kids are encouraged to use their phone for lots of other things. But who knows what they're really doing. A lot of times they're talking to other kids in other classrooms. I think you get my point.
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear the response.
Okay, Eliza, you're first. Okay, you can hold your heads up, it's okay. I know what you look like. No, I'm just kidding. It's an issue, cell phones are an issue across the board. We deal with it as parents in our own homes, as well as in schools. There are pros and cons to all technology. Yes, cell phones are used, I'm certain, in classrooms in a positive way. If they're doing research, if there's something they have to look up, if they're doing group work, it may be something that's accessible and they can find information that they need quickly. On the other hand, what you describe as sharing information or being on the phone, of course, those things are unacceptable. I can't speak to that happening in our classrooms. As a school committee member, we deal with budget and policy setting. We are not involved in micromanaging and the day-to-day operations of the school. That is for our administrators and our teachers. While I don't like hearing what you describe, and I'm sure nobody would, I can't say that I specifically know that's happening and that's within the school committee's purview. Certainly it's something we could bring up, it's something we could question, but it's not in our purview to deal with the day-to-day. Again, not saying that I am for what you're describing as a teacher, of course I'm not. And I don't think most of our teachers, or any of our teachers, would acknowledge that that's a good thing that's happening. And I can't personally speak for what's happening in their classrooms.
Where I work, our policy is phones are not to be visible and they are to be off. And this doesn't always happen. And I think our policy is soft. I don't think students should have their phone on their person during the school day. I think they should be away in a locker, it should be away in a bag, and it's zipped up. We're starting MCAS testing tomorrow at my school, and the state requires that students do not have any cell phones on their person whatsoever. So if it's good enough for MCAS, why isn't it good enough for the rest of the day? I would certainly support a policy where there's a no cell phone use policy during the school day. Certainly if parents need to reach their children, they can call the school office.
Can I just ask my last question?
Does anybody else have a question?
There's a question back here. He can go if he wants.
Okay, go ahead,
So
Jonathan.
my last question, I think, is, I think most people are aware that a lot of the kids that could go to the high school are choosing to go to other high schools, whether it's BP or might be the Aggie if they get accepted to these schools and so forth. But the enrollment in those programs are going up. And in many ways, the enrollment at the high school is going down. And that has a huge effect on the overall budget, not just for Dighton, but for Rehoboth and what the towns can afford to pay for the school systems to maintain them and so forth as well. So my question to both of you, as school board members potentially, or school committee members, what do you see as what's necessary to want to keep kids and families going to the traditional high school as opposed to the other schools? And I'm not suggesting the other schools don't offer a lot. They do. They offer a huge amount. But in terms of what the district has to look at for budgets, what do you think is necessary to keep kids going to the high school?
I voted against the BP expansion. I think it's a lot of money, and I think it's money that could have been better spent improving the programs we have at our high school, our industrial arts programs. I'm not sure that we could maybe quite get up to where BP is or something like that, but I think that money could have been better spent here within the town than with a regional school.
One of Superintendent Rooney's major goals and initiatives, and he discussed it when discussing the budget this year, is we recognize that we need to increase enrollment, and our budget has suffered for the reasons you mentioned. Some of the things that he has presently tried to do is we currently have a green and gold night, which was very well attended this year. It was the first time it was done, where we were emphasizing what the high school does have to offer. And amazingly, you would think that everyone in the district knows what our high school has to offer, but many who attended that evening said that it was eye-opening for them. They didn't know exactly what the school had to offer. Some of them one woman even made the comment that her son went to BP, and had she known what was offered at the high school, perhaps that might not have been the case. So certainly communicating what the high school does have to offer is something that we need to be better at, and we're beginning to do so. We also have, and Superintendent Rooney has recognized that there needs to be better communication between the middle schools and the high school, so that the middle school students also are aware of the programs and what exists at the high school. We've had some high school students, as well as our athletic director and activities director, come down and visit each of the middle schools so that they can emphasize with the kids, bringing some of our own students to the middle school, what is happening at our high schools. We also have looked at improving our facilities. Certainly that will help as well in getting students to want to come to our school, as opposed to the competition that will exist, certainly, especially with our new Bristol Aggie campus. That's pretty amazing. And the work that will be done at BP. So we need to take care of our own facilities, if you will, which is also difficult, in these difficult budget times, and oftentimes facilities, that's the can you kick down the road, so to speak, because that can wait. And this year we've had to do some of that with the difficulties we've had in the budget, but Superintendent Rooney has emphasized when he speaks with the committee and the community that that is something that we cannot continue to put aside. So improving our programs, improving communication, improving middle school to high school, and letting parents know exactly what the high school has to offer is what we'll try to do. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, so I first want to say thank you guys for at least coming. I'm disappointed that the other candidates aren't here, even if they're running unopposed. I guess my question is more generalized to anyone that's running for a seat, and I want all three to answer it because my question is more general, being on school committee and being elected to a board. We all know, as Tim indicated, this country's turned into your left or right, and it's like you just want to fight. And a couple of years back, school committee itself got divided on, if you're elected to a position, you are fully an individual. You have the right to say whatever you want. And there was a stance where, you know, the committee got divided and a subset decided to put out a statement basically denouncing what an individual said. And knowing that committees are not going to be in agreement, I'm just curious, even from the library perspective, if you happen to get reelected or whoever, what happens is, you know, same on school committee, I wish most selectmen's unopposed, but like, how would you handle the situation? Where do you feel the boundary is with, you know, people's freedom of speech versus a subset of a committee coming out and putting out a statement against what someone says as an individual?
Okay. Eliza, do you want to go first?
I'm not certain I completely understand the question that's being asked, but yes, we're all individuals, but if one member of a committee speaks out, whether they're speaking as an individual or they're speaking to represent the committee is important, first of all. But even as a school committee member, if I go out and make a statement, I'm making that statement as an individual. However, I do wear that school committee tag. I am an elected official, and if it is an issue that I feel strongly, or members of the committee feel strongly, we need to make a statement about, then that's something I think we have every right to do. And not only a right, but something we must do.
I said at the beginning, you know, I'm going to be honest and I'm going to be truthful. And I'm going to say what I believe. And I think it's okay if people disagree with me, and I think it's okay if I disagree with other people. But I think it's important that we listen to each other. We are respectful. And I'm not a closed-minded person where if somebody has a different perspective, I might change my mind on something like that. I don't think I'm right 100% of the time, and I don't think anybody is right 100% of the time. I'm not going to be told what to think or what to say about anything. I'll tell you what I think, I'll tell you what I believe, and if you disagree with me, I respect that.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. You know, libraries, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you know, I've been a library trustee for 15 years, and we have honest and open discussion. And if there's a member who disagrees, the first thing we need to keep in mind as library trustees is we're bound by the American Library Association Library Bill of Rights. That's what guides our decisions. And one of the key pieces of guidance for trustees from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners is essentially the test of your commitment to being a library trustee is that you can set aside your personal beliefs and views when they conflict with the national standards as represented in the Library Bill of Rights. I think libraries can be uniters, and I've seen that here. I've seen that here at Dighton. The library brings people together. There are other events in the town that bring people together as well. We've had a couple events recently. We had a chocolate tasting event that the chocolate person didn't show up for, but everybody remarked at how wonderful it was to have people from the town talking with each other. And the same thing, we had the other evening, a wonderful presentation on historic houses, and we learned a lot from people about their homes and about their passion for history and their passion for their homes. And I think that brings people together. And libraries could be uniters. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I'm sort of speaking from my heart now about what libraries can do. And I see it in other towns. We go to other libraries and we see what kind of dynamic they have there, and I just wish the same for the library here.
Okay. Mark?
I have a question for all three. Kind of speaking from the heart, what's the one best attribute that you bring to the table? That's it.
Jim, you want to go first?
My love for kids. I've worked with kids from preschool to high school, and I want what's best for them. And that's why I'm in this. And I'm just very concerned with what I'm seeing across the country. I think a lot of new ideologies that are coming into our public schools don't belong, and I think they're harmful to kids. And I don't feel like my voice is valued where I work because I'm just a teacher. And I'm hoping if I get elected, maybe as a school board member, I'll have a little more clout and I can bring some reasonable change. So that's basically what I bring to the table, is my passion for kids and what's best for them.
Hi, you stole my thunder. I too would say that my best attribute is my passion for students and education, as well as my passion to see the kids in our community achieve and be able to pursue whatever it is that makes them happy in life and successful.
What they just said. My passion for lifelong learning and personal enrichment that libraries provide in their contribution to healthy communities. So the answer to your question, the short answer is my passion for lifelong learning.
Dave?
Yeah, Dave Rose of Lincoln Avenue. I'm not sure it's a question, but I'm going to sort of speak to the school issue for a minute. I don't know.
Can you put it in a form of a question?
Do you know the answer to the following? And by the way, I just want to make a comment regarding a little bit previous question. And it's all politics, and everything should every issue you face should stand on the merits of the argument. And I'll leave that alone and I'll go back to the school. Can you answer this? Okay. I do not know if our high school here in Dighton tracks their students. I can tell you that based on my interview with the people that operate the agricultural school, they do not and have never tracked their students. Now, I'm going to take it to another level. Bristol Plymouth is a vocational school, and there's a reason why their student body is growing. And as was mentioned, maybe our student body is suffering from that, or the size of it is suffering from that. But maybe we track our students, and maybe there's a basis to brag about how the students from our high school do better over the long run than the students from a vocational school. Now it hurts me to say that a little bit because I'm a graduate of a vocational school, but I'm going to say you have to make your case there. If you can receive that as a question.
Thank you very much for your comments. I guess the question was about tracking students through high school and beyond it?
Yeah, after high school.
After high school, to see how they're doing in their adult lives?
Well, 5 years.
5 years, 10 years out? You want to go more than, like, say, 50 years out, I can tell you?
I will leave that up to the candidates, whatever issue it is.
Okay. Tim?
Tim looks like he's ready.
I don't know if you can do that. I mean, certainly you can encourage graduates to, 5 years later, reach out to them or something, like, how are you doing, things like that. But I think once they're out, and we kind of don't really have, control over them anymore, unless it's
Ask. There's no law against asking.
Yeah, you can ask, but again, some may and some may not, so I'm not sure how valid that comparison would be. It's an interesting idea, though.
Same. I don't think it's something we do, but it's certainly a good question. And I know as a teacher, and probably you would agree with me, Tim, that I often wonder what my students from the past are doing as adults and what fields they might be in. And I certainly would like to know that information for my own self, but it's not something that I believe our schools do. And as Tim mentioned, it's always good to hear back from students and see what they're doing, but that's of their own volition if they get back in touch with the schools.
The problem, I'm sorry for adding this, but the problem is, like the agricultural school comes forward with requesting over $100 million, and so what's the basis for it? Because you want a better looking school? The basis should be we graduate kids that go out into the fields of their study and they contribute to the state and the nation. They make a contribution to the state and the nation, and that's the justification for spending more money on that school. They can't do that right now. Maybe the kids are, maybe they're not, I don't know. But the school cannot say that right now.
Okay. Question in the back.
I know there was a survey that was put out, which I thought was really valuable.
Oh, the one that was online.
Yeah, I thought that was really valuable. And to speaking to him, I mean, I got one from college that I did the survey, and I could see how it would be really valuable to the school to learn how, like, what their students found valuable in the course selections, what they found valuable, what they took with them, what really served them, and what didn't serve them. So that's a good budget question to have in a survey, like what didn't serve you? I mean, what did we provide that was a waste of money?
Okay.
But I think that survey that we did put out, I think we did put out that, and I was pretty happy with that.
And that's a great point, and that's the individual, though, taking the initiative to send it in, and that's their own personal information and their choice.
Right.
Certainly, we would love to hear from graduates and know what they're doing and giving us that information. And that goes back to Mr. Rosa, to your question, what did you find of value in your educational experience? And BPA, BA, Dighton, Rehoboth, we all offer valuable experiences, but connecting.
I think the town is doing their part in surveying to figure out, to get Sam's opinion about where to spend money. I think they are doing due diligence, figuring that out. They put the survey out there anyway.
Absolutely, and just, I know personally working with the student advisory group at DR as a school committee member and being the liaison to that group, when we meet, they can give us their concerns, they talk about what's going on well in the school, what needs to be addressed, they also present for the school committee, and that's very valuable information. And so what you're asking is, once they're beyond, if we could continue to get that information.
All you can do is send out the survey, those who respond.
Yeah.
But it tells you something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see why we just don't do that with the graduating seniors at the end of their senior year before they leave the school, is ask them.
No, that won't tell you.
No, but to Mrs. Reynolds' question about, what programs were effective, what didn't work. There's no reason why we can't ask the seniors, what were your perspectives of your high school experience? What programs did you find valuable? What programs did you find superfluous? So I think that's something that we could do, as an end of the year type of thing with the seniors. I mean, I know right now we survey students to death. I don't know what one more at the end of their senior year would harm.
Any other questions? Kevin?
So I just want to circle back specifically to Mr. Toole, and I respect everybody's opinion, views, and the way they vote for whatever reasons they do. You talked about voting no for BP, and I can understand your reasoning behind it, but we seem to have, it's happens regularly in our town that when another group puts forth a worthwhile plan, we use our schools as an excuse why we shouldn't fund it. So we make them pay for our sins. Our school committee has not put forth any plans to get rid of the trailers or to fix the high school. So are you 100% committed to taking that path to actually improve our schools and not use it as an excuse to not fund other worthwhile projects?
Okay, we're going to have both candidates answer that. And we'll start with Tim.
Okay, so I think what you're asking, you're talking about the kids in the trailers.
Well, just in general, I think the trailers and the high school, I think more specifically is the bigger structural problem.
The town's growing. The town is really, really growing. And I think it's a matter of time before we're either going to need to add on to the schools or we're going to have to build more schools. Am I committed to that, to ensuring that the students of this town have the best school buildings, the best facilities, the best resources? Yes, I am. And I know that's may not be popular with a lot of taxpayers because my taxes are high too, and I get that. But we have to do what's right for the students, and we can't use the students, we can't not give the students what they need. That's just wrong. That's the best way I can answer you.
Thanks. And when we discuss at school committee the BP and BA issue, and we know that next year our towns, both Dighton and Rehoboth, will need to be funding those schools and those additions. And those schools, I have stated at school committee meetings, those schools have advocated for what they needed for their students. And when it comes back to our school committee and Dighton and Rehoboth, we should not be punished for the fact that we in fact now have to pay for BP and BA. I think BP and BA are wonderful alternatives. Our students should have the opportunity to attend those schools. But we need to also deal with the fact that our schools need attention as well. If some of the building that is suggested taking place in our town, I don't know where those students are going to be housed. We are at top capacity at both our schools. When I toured our schools, I would welcome any of you, as parents, you know how crowded the elementary school and the middle school are. That creates safety issues. We all know how important that is right now. I think our first step, and going back to, saying when are we going to do that? Are we committed to doing that? I was chair at the time, going back about 5 years. I believe those modulars are now at 5 to 6 years. And I remember being at the town meeting where we assured citizens of Dighton that this would be a temporary fix, that we needed 3 to 5 years to look at it, to develop a plan. And quite frankly, that didn't happen in those 3 to 5 years. And oftentimes what happens, again, in the field of education, and I know our dollars are limited, but we respond in time of crisis when now here they are, and where are we going to place them? That's why our school district is right now looking at that MSBA feasibility study. Hopefully we'll be accepted into that. It's very competitive, so I can't guarantee that will happen, but the town of Dighton did vote on a warrant article to allow the funds, $150,000 for that feasibility study. It's a place to begin, to have a group come in if we're accepted, come in, take a look at our facilities. What are the possibilities? Do we add on? Do we have to do a completely new building? But it's time, it's past time, and we do need to be committed to that, and we have to advocate for that in this district.
All right. Any other questions? All right, right here in the front. You haven't had a turn this evening.
I have a question on the school. I believe only Mrs. Kuchar will be able to answer it.
Well, both will have the opportunity to try.
Okay. You stated in your opening statement that you just cut six positions from the school. Were these positions already in place? And if so, with our budget growing every year, where's the money going that was funding these 6 people?
We, as many school districts, again, across the Commonwealth, across the nation, were faced this past year with rising utility costs. We have contractual obligations that take up a great percentage of our budget. Inflation certainly played a role in this past year's budget. So all of those issues combined, and the fact that, as I stated earlier, there's a limited amount of money that our towns have in that bucket, and we have to separate it out, and it's not just the school district that needs the funds. So for many reasons, the funds just weren't there this year. We also have an excess and deficiency fund, and we used as revenue $750,000 of that fund as a revenue source to lower the assessments to each of the towns. My suggestion at the last school committee meeting, because I couldn't support cutting programs for the reasons I stated earlier, I don't want to see our school district going backward. Our students today shouldn't have less than what we had when we were growing up in schools. I know it's difficult times. However, my solution, I know oftentimes we say, well, I didn't vote for that budget, here's the problem, but I don't have a solution to offer either. My solution at the time was perhaps we could use a little bit more of our E&D. It's not something we want to do regularly. It's not a source of revenue that will be there always, so that will go back into our operational budget at some point. Not a good way to deal with your budget. However, when I see programs being cut like that, perhaps if we had put in a little more of our E&D, we could go back to the town of Dighton, go back to the town of Rehoboth and say, now can you meet us? We're a little bit closer, and can you meet us where we need to be?
I'm going to be completely honest. School finance is my Achilles heel. I know Mrs. Kuchar could run circles around me when it comes to talking about school finance and things like that. But what I do know and what I do see where I work is there's an awful lot of fat in the budget. And we have programs that I see little to no value in, and I'm confident that if we look at what money is being spent on, I can advocate for some programs that might go. Unfortunately, when cuts have to be made, I do know that it's usually staff, because a huge chunk of the budget is teacher administrative salary. So that is unfortunate, and that's usually where those cuts have to be made, unfortunately. But I would like to take a close look at how money is being spent and make some suggestions of programs that might be cut. And I don't know if it could save a position or two, but it'd be worth looking into, I think.
Questions? Yes.
My question is for the school committee candidates. It's based on something that Tim said in his opening statement, which is that basically you said you would discourage elementary school teachers from teaching students to be anti-racist. And I'm quite certain that's what you said. And I want to know exactly what you meant by that. And then I would also be interested in hearing what Eliza, how she feels about that issue. So we're talking about elementary school kids and discouraging teachers from teaching them to be anti-racist. I just want to know what you meant by that.
Well, no, that's what I said is that's not the role of classroom teachers. That's not the role of a classroom teacher, is to get up in front of little children and say, listen, we're going to teach you how to fight against racism. We're going to do. I don't think that's the role of school teachers. I think that's the role of parents. I'm not, and I hope you're not conflating it to say that I want, people to grow up and become racist and all that. I think that we need to be inclusive, we need to be accepting of people, and I believe that wholeheartedly, and I live it every day. I just don't think it's the role of teachers to do this, to turn their students into social justice warriors. I mean, I am not racist, and I abhor racism, But I also don't think it's my role as a teacher to go in and tell students, we all have to become anti-racist. I think it's enough that I'm not a racist, and I think racism is wrong. So I'm sorry if you misconstrued my opening statement.
Oh, I did not.
Fair enough.
Eliza? That question seemed to be more directed at the comments that were made, but certainly I'll agree in that we need to be inclusive. We need to welcome every student in our community. Our motto is we are DR, and that's all inclusive. Everyone needs to feel that they belong. I'm presently a representative on the Portrait of a Graduate Committee that we've been working on in our district, where we are looking at what skills and what we would like to see our students graduate with. We're in the process of creating a new vision, mission, statement, and district strategic plan, and that's the first step in that plan. And in working with this group, there are teachers, administrators, parents, students on this committee, and it should guide us in our principles and be the gold sort of North Star for us. And as I take part in those discussions and presentations, the common theme and what most people at the last workshop we did, we had to come up with what are the skills, what are the traits, what do we want for our graduates. Inclusion, diversity, welcoming other opinions, being able to reach out and collaborate, cooperate, come to decisions together. All of that is what I'm seeing that people want for our graduates. Not anything that denies inclusion or separates us in some way, but rather how can we come together, work together, and be successful as a community. Okay. Dave?
Oh, this is my last question.
It is your last question.
Thank you very much. That's a great relief. I want to speak to the issue of funding in schools. It seems to me that this nation is awash in money. I sort of hate what that implies, but we seem to have endless amounts of money for anything overseas. So my question is, would the candidates, and maybe the audience as well, support a letter writing campaign to your state rep, your state senator, your congressman, your senators, and maybe beyond, to say, hey, how about redirecting some of our tax dollars back to our school system here in Dighton? Thank you very much. So if you could support that, that's my question.
So the question is, can you support a letter writing campaign to bring tax dollars back to our schools? That's it in a nutshell. Okay.
I don't think that's in a nutshell. As opposed to dollars being spent in other areas that perhaps...
Well, you can continue to fund the losing war in Ukraine, or God knows what.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to address national political issues. I stated that in my opening statement.
There are tax dollars in the schools.
Mr. Rosa, please.
I believe in the right to petition your government, and I've written letters to my Congress people before, and I think everybody does what they want to do, and certainly I think education needs more funding. I think it's more important than a lot of things money is spent on in this country. So, my students, they're going to start writing to their Congress people next week as part of a civics lesson. And I tell them to write about what's important to them, what they're passionate about. And so I think adults can do the same.
Thank you. Okay. We have one last question. Are you sure it's one question?
I'm going to get really simple, and maybe this ends us all on a positive note. Could each of the candidates, and I think I got a sense from the library answer earlier, but could each of the candidates tell us, all three of you, whether it's the schools or the library, something that we are currently doing that is really you think is making a positive difference?
Okay. We'll start with Ron. Poor Ron at the end.
Thought I was going to get all the the tough questions, and Jonathan, you saved it till the end then. The library is doing a lot of positive things. I alluded to programs that it does that brings people together, but the other important thing that the library has initiated under the leadership of Director Jocelyn Tavares is acquiring laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots that gives access to the internet for those who don't have it, so that students are able to get their homework done and projects done at home, rather than using the Wi-Fi at Wi-Fi at the library or in other places. So there's a lot of things that the library does to make life better in Dighton. Lots of resources that it offers, but I guess the simple answer to your question is programs that bring people together, that enrich lives and are part of lifelong learning is a key thing that libraries can do, because it creates dialogue. We saw it the other night, we've seen it a couple of times now very recently, and I think that's all a good thing. Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint. My children have not attended Dighton schools in at least 12 or 13 years. So as far as recently, I really can't speak to that. So I'll just...
I think accentuating what is positive in our community and our schools is certainly something that has made a positive impact, and I credit Superintendent Rooney and his administration with the wonderful communication that is taking place in the community right now. There are so many places where you can log on and see what is happening in our schools, and that's being advertised and as it needs to be. And I'll go a step further and go into the library. I see the new library as exciting for our school district as well. I see libraries as an extension of the school day. It's a place to come together. It's a place that meets the needs of all in our community, from the very young to the elderly. It's a place to gather. It's a place, if we have the space, it's a space where we can socialize, something that's been missing for numerous reasons for the past few years. And I do see that as a very positive thing in our community too, and it lets everyone know what Dighton as a community values, and that's an extension of the educational system.
Would any of the candidates like 1 minute for a closing statement, or? Yes? It's up to you. Okay, go right down the table.
Very briefly, I would just like to thank the Friends of the Library for hosting this event. Thank you all for coming this evening, and I hope to see you all at the polls on April 8th.
Teachers are burnt out, and I know this because I am one. Every year, more and more responsibility is heaped upon the shoulders of educators, guidance staff, and administrators. We need to listen to teachers more than we currently do. They are the experts on the academic needs of their students. Over the last few years, at least where I work, the opinions of teachers have been valued less than in previous years. Trust me, this affects morale. Those individuals who make educational policy need to do a better job of listening to those who work on the front lines in our schools, the teachers. In closing, I want to put my knowledge, education, and experience to work for the students, families, and taxpayers of Dighton and Rehoboth. I feel that as an educator, my opinions on the current state of public education are not valued and are largely ignored by Central and School Administration, the Taunton School Committee, and especially the Department of Education. My hope is if I'm elected to the DR School Committee, my opinions will carry more weight than they currently do, and I can hope to bring some positive change. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Friends of the Dighton Public Library and for all of you for being here this evening. I had the good fortune as a child to go to an elementary school in the city of Worcester where there was a branch of the public library in the basement of the library, not a school library, but an actual branch of the public library that children and adults would use on a regular basis. And I remember getting my first, I can picture it still, the large library card, the cardboard type, not the plastic type. And I think therein lies my passion for libraries. I had a library in my elementary school from kindergarten on through 5th grade. And I love Dighton. I love the Dighton Library. And I began my journey as a library trustee at a time when we had a plan for a new library. And that's where I joined the effort as a member of the building committee, and then said, I'm going to become a trustee, and I want to bring us to the day when we can cut the ribbon on a new library. And we're this close to that happening with the library building plan for Main Street. And we're running out of time. There's like one more. We're running out of time. But it's not a lot of time, so I will stop there. Happy to talk with anybody about the rest of my comments. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone on behalf of the Friends for being here tonight, the voters, and the candidates who showed up tonight. We appreciate it. And do remember to please vote on April 8th. And this has been recorded and it will be shown on Channel 9 as well as on YouTube. So again, thank you for coming.